Welcome to Grief Anatomy, Episode 2, affectionately called The Hidden Power of Boundaries, your guide to sanity, self-respect, and maybe even a little joy. Ever felt like your personal space is basically a doormat with a flashing welcome sign? Do you say yes when you mean heck no? Or find yourself emotionally drained from carrying other people's baggage like an unpaid therapist? If so, you're definitely in the right place. Hi everyone, I'm Andy, your host, and I want to start by saying that wherever you are on your journey, you are doing the best you can, and starting it is the hard part, but forward is forward progress. So this space is specifically here for you to listen, reflect, and feel seen and heard. Grief, loss, and trauma touch all of us at some point in our lives. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, a pet, a relationship, or even a part of ourselves we can't get back, grief will show up in different ways for different people with different lived experiences. Trauma, too, leaves its imprint, sometimes in ways we don't expect. And yet, so often, we're told to move on, stay strong, or get over it. But healing doesn't follow a timeline. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. Our aim is to explore what grief really looks like, not just in theory, but in real, raw, human experiences. We'll talk about the multifaceted grief, the emotions that come with it, how trauma and loss intertwine, and ways we can honor our healing, whatever that looks like for each of us. This conversation may be triggering at times, so please be kind to yourself. Again, I cannot express this enough. The material can be hefty, so if you need to pause to digest, take a deep breath, or step away, that's okay. It is okay to meet yourself where you're at without judgment. This is not about having all the answers. It's about making space for the questions, for the feelings, and for the stories that deserve to be heard. Additionally, in this space, you won't find names here, just voices, stories, and a shared experience of grief, loss, and trauma. If you're listening, you might be carrying something heavy. Maybe you've lost someone you love, or maybe you're grieving something less tangible. A relationship, a part of yourself, a sense of safety. Whatever it is, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. Here we are trying to create a space for honesty, for reflection, and for meeting ourselves where we are at any given point. Grief doesn't follow a straight path, and healing isn't about getting over it. It's about learning to carry it differently in a way that you can coexist with grief, not always handing over the reins to grief all the time. Some of what we discuss may be difficult to hear and/or process. Do what feels right for you. You are not alone in this. In this series, it isn't just another pep talk about saying no more often. It's a deep, messy, sometimes hilarious exploration of what it really means to set boundaries, not just in theory, but in real life, where things get complicated and messy. We're talking about the hard conversations, the guilt trips, the but it's family excuses, and the shocking realization that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's very necessary. I've brought along a colleague who shares the same sense of passion and lived experience to help me break down all the copious amounts of material in this episode. Welcome, friend, and thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I am happy to be here. Let's jump right in. Each episode features real, unfiltered, you as the expert stories from people who've struggled with boundaries. Whether it's breaking free from toxic relationships, learning to stop people-pleasing, or simply figuring out how to set limits without feeling like a villain in someone else's story. And here's the twist. Boundaries aren't just about keeping things out. They're also about making space for what matters.
Oh, great points, friend. Teamwork makes the dream work. Yes, we are going to try and unpack it all, the awkward, the emotional, and even the laugh-out-loud moments that happen when we finally stand our ground. Expect candid conversations, unfiltered honesty, and practical insights that will leave you thinking, wait, why didn't I start doing this journey a lot sooner?
So, whether you're a boundary newbie, a recovering overgiver, or just here for the chaos and how it unfolds, this podcast about grief and boundaries is your invitation to join us. Bring your frustrations, your victories, and maybe even a hot beverage. We're making space for it all. Learning to set boundaries while grieving isn't just about keeping the peace with others. It's about finally making peace with yourself.
Thank you again for tuning in. My colleague and I appreciate everyone for being here today. We do have a special guest that we've interviewed who will remain anonymous. They have generously donated their time and experience to this episode with vulnerability and panache. We really appreciate this contributor for being with us today as we navigate grief, trauma, and boundaries. We tend to overthank our contributors because it takes great strength and tenacity to openly share deep, dark parts of ourselves, which we commonly keep sheltered and hidden. Plus, we shamelessly and selfishly overthank you, it is true. But we are also using it as a ploy to recruit others to share. Haha, I'm so glad you're here with us today. Whether you're in the middle of it, coming out the other side, or just trying to make sense of what the heck grief even is, you've come to the right spot, and this is the place for you. Today, we're diving into one of the stickiest, trickiest corners of grief. Complicated grief. Yep, it is just how it sounds. Complicated. I'm also joined by someone I deeply admire for their honesty and insight, a podcast contributor. Thank you so much for being here with us and for being willing to share your story so openly. I want to remind you to share only what you are comfortable with, and if it becomes too much, feel free to break or pass. There are no obligations to push through as an expectation. On that note, what brought you to this conversation today?
Thanks for having me. It means a lot. So, I've been living with what's known as complicated grief, or prolonged grief disorder, for most of my life. It's not just a bad month or a rough patch. This is the kind of grief that hangs around kind of like a roommate that never cleans up and eats all your labeled food without replacing it. You know, the one zazz that messes with your mental health consistently, but you have no other choice, so you grin and bear it?
Oh yeah, I think we've all been there. Ugh, that is the worst kind of roommate.
Right? And the thing is, it's not just emotional. It seeps into everything. And I mean everything. I had no idea, but it affected my identity, my surrounding relationships, and how I move through the world. Growing up, I felt like I was playing the role of a normal kid, trying to copy how other people socialized, because I didn't feel connected to myself at all. I don't even know how I did, because I was so self-conscious and all over the place. I am sure I gave myself away on many occasions, just don't know when. Honestly, I had no parental guidance or siblings who cared, zero support, so nothing to build off of. It was like I was a mimic, hoping that if I played the part well enough, I'd eventually feel like I belonged by simply following what others did. Spoiler alert, that didn't work out, just so you know.
I can imagine. Why do you think it didn't work for you?
I was not my authentic self, for starters. I could not know from one moment to the next what was to come, or if I was doing well and avoiding suspicion of duplicating someone else's attitude, personality, behaviors, etc. It actually backfired on many occasions. I became a people pleaser to survive, not realizing I was slowly erasing any version of myself in the process, even the pretend parts. At the center of it all was a childhood filled with instability, abuse, insecurities, and abandonment. And instead of blaming the people who hurt me, I turned it towards myself and began to blame and shame myself. That word, unlovable, it just kind of stuck.
Oh, that's heavy. And yet, so many people carry that same label around in silence. You know, research actually shows 10 to 20% of folks experience complicated grief that literally changes how the brain functions. It can feel like being stuck in a loop you can't get out of.
Yes, exactly. And it's exhausting. Some days it's like my grief is driving the car and I'm just the unwilling passenger, hanging on as it speeds up and dodges and swerves perilously. Like I can't just get out, you know? Also, I can't control my environment. Even little things, like asserting myself, saying no, or just showing up as the eventual authentic me, felt debilitating, derailing, and impossible. The grief bulldozed me and still does to this day. Then there are the foggy days when I can't even handle the human basics. Dishes? Nope. Return an email? Not happening. Answer the phone? Forget it. It's not laziness, though. It's like my body and mind are wading through molasses.
Totally. I've read that prolonged grief can even trigger symptoms that look like chronic illness, like fatigue, pain, anxiety, and depression. Like, the body is just stuck in fight or flight mode habitually. When you don't know how to get off the hamster wheel, it can be very difficult and bothersome for most, especially when you have no idea where to even start, or how or when it started.
Oh yeah, I can attest to that. I live there, have a vacation home and hypervigilance and overthinking that I visit often. Certain places, smells, dates, they're all landmines for me. It makes trust hard. It makes stability feel like a fantasy novel. And that's not even touching how complicated it makes my relationships. I just want all my relationships to be patient and soft while I navigate this rough terrain, because I don't even want to be going through this, so I get that they don't want to be going through this with me as well.
I can see that, which is why I think it's so important to name this stuff as it surfaces. If we could just give our grief a shape, a face, maybe even a ridiculous little hat like they did in Harry Potter, you know, the wardrobe from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The scene where the students were faced with personal fears, but cast a ridiculous spell, and Neville Longbottom turned Professor Snape into a vulture-topped hat in a green dress with a big red handbag to defuse his greatest fear. Well, I feel it would be less like something we had to fight off and more like something we could learn to live with.
Yes, I love the reference. Honestly, just let me grieve out loud without being told to look on the bright side, or reminded that everything happens for a reason. No thanks, I'd rather scream into the void. No one wants to sit with anyone anymore, it feels like.
I bet. It may feel that way for you because of your upbringing, and everything was very disorganized for you, so you have no benchmark or support, as you mentioned in the beginning. I do think that being here and talking about it does give some shape, face, and outline to what you faced or continue to face today. It can be significantly more comfortable to do as the students did at Hogarth's and name what they fear or face continually. Maybe you could crochet while you are shouting into the void. A nice little hat for your fear, like Neville did for Snape.
I could, haha. Honestly, I just want people to sit with me in the mess. Do not try to fix it or me. Do not try to shrink it or minimize it. Just be with me. Sit with me while this new and old stuff surfaces.
Yeah, it's wild how many people treat grief like a math problem to be solved. Oh, it's been 3 months. You should be fine now. But for people like you, it's not about getting over someone or something. It's about grieving the life that never was, and all the complexities that come later in life due to a fractured upbringing. That's a whole different beast that few experience.
Yeah, you're telling me. It is completely new and understated to me and others going through complicated grief, I think. Mourning the version of me I never got to become because I was too busy in survival mode. And that survival mode continued to carry me into adulthood, where I didn't even realize I was recreating the same trauma loops over and over. Same relationship dynamics, same strategies, same overthinking, same everything.
So, you were choosing what felt familiar, even if it was harmful?
Yeah, because I honestly didn't know better. Until one day, I started to see it. Like, really saw it. And after that, I couldn't unsee it. That's when I started the slow, messy process of healing. Only I didn't know it was the start of the healing process.
Yeah, of course. We both know that healing is never linear, right?
Oh no, healing's more like an inebriated GPS system. Make a U-turn. Nope. Recalculating. You're in a cornfield now. Haha.
Yep, I've been there. So, what helped you start finding a way out of that cycle?
Well, therapy helped, and lots of it. But it took trial and error to find what worked. I tried various trauma-informed therapies, EMDR, CBT, group therapy, you name it, I tried it. Each one chipped away at the wall I had built around myself.
That's great. EMDR is fascinating. For those who don't know, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. You process trauma while doing specific eye movements. Sounds simple, but it's backed by science and does work.
It worked for me, like tapping into a stuck memory and gently moving it somewhere it can actually rest.
Well, that's wonderful. You said you tried CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's all about challenging those old thought patterns, right?
Exactly. It helped me stop spiraling in shame and guilt loops and start recognizing when I was being too hard on myself, which I always am, so I am grateful for that ongoing therapy.
which, by the way, is so common that people experiencing complicated grief, well, all types of grief, are particularly hard on themselves with thoughts of overwhelming guilt and shame, while overthinking in cycles. People think that if they can just be positive enough, they'll heal through it. But that kind of forced cheerfulness, toxic positivity, it can be quite challenging to overcome.
Oh, 100%. My family was the poster child for toxic positivity. Smile through the pain so others don't know. Pretend everything is fine. Meanwhile, I was dying inside. I guess that is the hallmark of social media nowadays, as long as everything looks good on the outside. Haha.
That good vibes only stuff can actually delay the grief processing, because we need to name it, feel it, in order to heal it. As cliche as that sounds. You can't change what you don't acknowledge.
Yep, that's true. And that includes the body too. I didn't realize for a long time how much my grief was showing up physically. Stomach problems, constant tension, headaches, even my immune system was tanking over and over again without knowing why. Well, I guess I do know now why, haha.
I've seen some of the research on that, how grief can suppress immune function for a year or more. Our bodies are literally in mourning. Pretty interesting, eh?
That makes a ton of sense. I felt like my entire system was on strike with no pay or benefits.
So now that you're here, further down the road, what does support look like for you?
Honestly, boundaries. I need boundaries galore. Learning to say no without apologizing. Not letting people guilt me into erasing myself. It's hard, especially when you've never done it before and you have no guidelines. But every time I hold a boundary, I'm reminding myself that I matter. Because I do.
That's huge. People underestimate how radical boundary setting is when you've spent your life putting everyone else first or following ingrained family structures. Good for you.
It's like learning a new language, honestly. But I'm getting better at it. And slowly, I'm starting to feel, dare I say it, kind of okay. I don't want to jinx myself.
Kind of okay is a big win in grief land. And I don't think you jinxed yourself. It seems like you are acknowledging your progress. I admire the strength and tenacity it took to get there. Forward is forward.
Right? I'll take it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, truly, for sharing all of this with us. It's raw, it's real, and it's what we need more of. You've reminded us that healing isn't about perfection, nor is it about the finish line. It's about showing up, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy.
Thank you. This space means the world to me. At first, I was a little apprehensive when asked, but it really feels liberating in an anonymous way that still keeps me safe, helps, little by little, heal the broken parts of me.
Something you said earlier with your comments now really landed with me, and hopefully our listeners too, that grief became your projected identity. Like, you weren't just feeling grief, you were becoming it. Does that sound right?
Exactly. It wasn't something I chose to carry, it carried me. People saw the outside version of me going through the motions, doing all the normal things, working, socializing, smiling, but underneath, I was just barely surviving and was so utterly confused. That grief had taken root in my bones, my nervous system, even my sense of reality. It was the filter for everything.
That reminds me of a quote I recently heard. Grief doesn't change you, it reveals you. But in your case, and I know for a lot of folks with complicated grief, it doesn't just reveal you. It can replace parts of you, especially when that grief is tied to trauma. You start looking in the mirror and think, who am I? And the scariest part? Sometimes, most times, you don't even have an answer.
Oh yeah, haha. I've had full identity crises at stoplights, like real existential breakdowns, and it didn't matter where. It hit me in places I thought were safe and secure, or when I thought I had dealt with the bulk of it. And nobody knows, right? No one sees that you're internally spiraling. You're just that person standing in aisle 5, staring at cereal boxes, having a full-on identity collapse over Raisin Bran.
Oh boy, haha, recognizing that Raisin Bran is triggering and fiber-rich, haha. Who knew? But seriously, I think that hits home for so many people who are high-functioning through grief. The world doesn't give space for invisible suffering. You're expected to return to work, show up at birthdays, answer emails, when inside your body is on fire and your soul feels like it's crumbling. I've been there, and I see you.
Yes. And then people say things like, "You seem fine," or "You're so strong." And I'm like, no, I'm just really good at pretending. Because if I don't pretend, I unravel. And if I unravel, then what? There's no space, no soft landing, no blueprint for what comes after the unraveling. And it makes people in society uncomfortable, and we can't have that.
Okay, let's talk about that unraveling. This is why we are here. Because when complicated grief meets chronic people-pleasing, oh my God, it's a recipe for emotional bankruptcy. You're constantly overextending yourself, doing damage control, second-guessing everything you say. And the moment you try to reclaim even a sliver of peace or say no to someone, your whole nervous system revolts. This is why boundaries are so important, especially for those with a background such as yours. Would you agree?
Yep, 100%, and it's loud. Like chest tightening, palm sweating, heart racing kind of revolt. You feel like the villain just for setting a boundary. You're out here trying to protect your peace, and suddenly you're the bad guy in everyone else's story. It is debilitating.
Oof, I can imagine. And you know what? It reminds me of something a trauma therapist once told me. Your body doesn't know the difference between danger and disappointment. Like, your body reacts to a friend being upset with the same panic it would to a bear attack, in flight and fight responses. Because for people with trauma-wired brains, any form of conflict or perceived rejection can feel life-threatening and run on hyperdrive because we know no different.
That's exactly it. I wasn't avoiding people. I was avoiding annihilation, haha, emotional annihilation. Like if someone didn't like me or thought I was too much, it felt like proof that I was too much and unlovable. And not just for them, but for everyone, including myself.
And that right there is the grief that nobody talks about. The grief of never having felt like enough. Not just mourning someone you lost, but mourning the you that never got to exist safely.
Exactly. That's the core of it. I didn't lose just people. I lost versions of myself. Entire lifetimes of potential I couldn't access because I was too busy surviving, and then it became who I was and how I functioned. I knew no better and felt like I had no other path to take. That's a type of grief that doesn't go away with sympathy.
Whoa, say that again for the folks in the back, because I think this is such an important truth. Healing from complicated grief isn't just about learning how to say goodbye. It's about finally learning how to say hello to yourself. Maybe for the first time ever. Learning to love, be kind, and soft with oneself is a new journey, but I see you taking this path, and it shows.
That gave me goosebumps. Because it's so true. I used to think healing was about getting back to who I was before. Like rebuilding my upbringing will somehow form me into a better version of myself. But I've had to let that go because I'm competing with something that never existed, and I can't go back to. The person I was before didn't have the tools, the safety, or the voice to be fully alive. Healing means becoming someone I've never been before, and that is terrifying, but it's also kind of beautiful.
I love this for you, and you are 100% doing it. Like, right now, showing up for yourself. You're sitting here, telling your truth, saying the quiet parts out loud, and I think that's revolutionary. That's healing in real time while being vulnerable, not the shiny, filtered version of healing we see online, but the messy, gut-wrenching, real deal kind. I am so happy for you.
Thanks, Andy. Honestly, being here and having this conversation, it's been one of the most validating things I've experienced in a long time. Just being able to name it, as you said before. I think that's where the healing starts. Not in the fixing, but in the naming. Then I can identify it and move the next phase of healing.
I couldn't agree more. Naming your grief gives it structure, shape. And once it has shape, it's not just this formless thing haunting your every move, it becomes something you can work with. It's not the enemy anymore, it's part of your story, but not the whole story. Starting anywhere is growth and healing. Let's normalize talking about it, because you are not responsible for your trauma, but you are responsible for your healing. You are doing the hard stuff here. You should be proud of yourself. I know I am. Slight shift. I know we talked a little about the effects complicated grief has on the body. Let's revisit that because I think grief doesn't just live in our memories or our minds. It takes up real estate in the body, and a lot of folks don't even realize that what they're experiencing physically might be grief or trauma or both.
Sure. For the longest time, I thought I just had bad posture or low energy. But it was deeper than that. My shoulders were permanently tense. When I say that, I mean I had no neck because they permanently lived by my ears. My jaw was always clenched, so much so that my dentist recommended a mouth guard to protect my teeth because I was grinding at all points in the day and night. I really wasn't breathing. I was bracing for impact. Every day felt like my body was quietly trying to survive a war that no one else could see or understand.
Oh, bracing! That word, that's it. Right there. That's what chronic grief can feel like. Like your nervous system is stuck in this low-key alarm state, scanning for danger, tensing for impact. Even when nothing is technically wrong, it's exhausting for the person. They say there are bigger impacts on the body if you see it coming, like in a motor vehicle accident. More damage can be sustained when you brace for impact, when you see it coming, versus when you don't. Life is kind of like that. If you are hyper-aware and vigilant towards grief, trauma, and the like, you can never truly relax and breathe into it because we don't know how to. This information was never introduced, nor was the guidebook, the How to Successfully Manage.
Exactly. And because I didn't understand that was trauma and my grief, I thought I was the problem. Like, why can't I just relax? Why does my stomach hurt all the time? Why do I feel like I'm about to cry when someone just asks me how I'm doing? Why do I stuff down my feelings and emotions to make myself and others feel better when I don't? It wasn't until I learned about the nervous system, about hypervigilance, about stored grief, naming my trauma and emotions, that things started clicking and I could see a little light in the darkness.
Let's get into that a bit more, because I know for some listeners this might be their first time hearing that grief can live in the body. We're talking insomnia, digestive issues, panic attacks that come out of nowhere, chronic fatigue, even autoimmune flares in some cases.
Yep. As I said before, it had a habit of showing up as chronic tightness in my chest, neck pain, headaches, and this constant buzzing in my arms. I was definitely over-caffeinating just to feel normal, and then crashing pretty early on in the day. But once I understood my nervous system was in a constant fight-or-flight loop, I started getting curious instead of self-critical. Like, what's my body trying to say?
Oh, I love that shift. From shaming your body to listening to it, that's huge. So let's talk about some small but great ways you started healing. Nothing Instagram perfect, of course, just real-life tools that helped you start to unfreeze a little and see that light a little.
Honestly, the start was just doing breath work. Nothing fancy, just YouTube-guided stuff. Small minutes in the day until I needed more, and so I did more. I guess it sort of went into mediation too. I know this sounds small or insignificant, but just pausing and taking one real breath at a time allowed for the second real breath, then the third intentional real breath, and it grew from there. I'm talking like one actual inhale through the nose, one full exhale out of the mouth, in box breathing. That one breath became my reset button when things got overwhelming. I gradually added some meditation-like practices. The breathwork was fundamental, though, because I could see myself and I could incorporate visuals that would center me.
Yes, bravo. I call that coming home to your body. One slow breath at a time. It's free. It's available. You can apply it anywhere. It lives within you. And it works, even if it's just for 10 seconds. What else do you think has helped you?
I started putting my hand on my chest when I was spiraling to bring myself back to center. It sounds simple, but the pressure of my own hand told my body, I'm here, I've got you, we are going to be okay. It became this small ritual that reminded me I wasn't alone inside myself. I also added some anxiety exercises with breathing. I like to add more modalities as new or old things crop up for me, and mix and match them together. I find that works better when combined.
Ugh, I love that. Physical self-soothing is so underrated. Our bodies crave co-regulation, and when that's not available from others, we can offer it to ourselves. One hand to the heart, one hand to the belly, even rocking gently side to side. These are primal ways we calm our own nervous systems.
Another one that helped me was safe touch, like wrapping myself in a weighted blanket or holding a warm mug. Anything that grounded me in the here and now. Because grief often pulls you into the past or sends you spiraling into fear of the future.
So true. It's like your mind becomes a time traveler, and your body is just trying to anchor you to the present moment, especially when we are trying to sleep. And those anchors don't have to be big. A hot shower, standing barefoot on the ground. Name 5 things you can see. Micro moments of presence, along with breath work, are fantastic.
Absolutely. Recently, I have added letting myself feel instead of always trying to fix or solve the issues. I used to bypass my emotions by over-intellectualizing everything. I'd be like, I understand why I'm sad, and then try to move on or ignore it entirely. But the sadness never went anywhere because I hadn't felt it. I'd only narrated it.
You just described like half my therapy sessions. I call that emotional ghosting, where you think you've dealt with a feeling because you named it, but it's still sitting there in your chest, waiting to be witnessed, heard, and acknowledged.
Exactly. And what finally helped was permitting myself to grieve things that weren't death, but felt like it. The childhood I didn't get, the safety I never felt, the love I wanted but never received. That opened the door to much deeper healing.
Yes, 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 grieving isn't just about who we lost, it's also about what we never got. And I think we should normalize mourning unmet needs. That's not self-pity, that's emotional honesty, and it's how we start to reclaim our power.
And for me, that meant safely talking to my inner child. Like, literally talking to her. I'd imagine her sitting beside me on the couch, and I'd say, I'm so sorry no one protected you. But I'm here now. And I won't abandon you. I love you.
That kind of self-parenting is deeply sacred. It rewires how we relate to ourselves. And when we do that, grief doesn't disappear, but it stops being the dictator of our lives. It becomes a guest, not the landlord. All right, folks, that's it for today's interview session. I want to thank my special guest for contributing and saying the difficult things out loud and proud. Being vulnerable is not easy, so I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you chose to participate and shed a little light in the dark. I value your journey and wish you all the best in your healing and growth journey. So, if this resonated with you or someone you love is going through complicated grief, know that you're not alone. Healing doesn't mean erasing the pain. It means learning how to carry it with more grace, more strength, and a little more community. Be kind to yourself and to others.
We are going to dive right into boundaries with my returned colleague from earlier. We are going to talk about boundaries, what they are, why they matter, how they shape our relationships, mental health, personal well-being, and overall, how they show up in different areas of life. We will also be discussing what happens when boundaries are violated, who benefits from a lack of boundaries, and how different life experiences, like culture, tradition, abuse, and manipulation, can impact our ability to set and maintain boundaries.
So, what are boundaries?
Boundaries are the limits we set to protect our physical, emotional, and mental well-being. They define what is acceptable and what isn't in our relationships and daily lives.
And are there different types of boundaries?
Yes, but first, boundaries are the limits we set to protect our emotional, physical, and mental well-being. They define what we are comfortable with and what we aren't. Those types of boundaries are, but not limited to, the physical, personal space, touch, privacy; emotional, not absorbing others' emotions, saying no; time, how we prioritize our energy and commitments; digital, social media, texting, work-life balance; sexual, consent, personal comfort; and financial, money-related expectations and agreements.
How do we use boundaries? Effectively or better at all?
Ask yourself, how can one set boundaries in their personal life? Identify what makes them uncomfortable and uneasy. especially if it is an ongoing recurrence. Make sure that when you express yourself, it is not rooted in dysregulation, and it has the capacity to be heard by the receiver. And most importantly, implement and apply the boundaries consistently and generously. Surrounding yourself with supportive people is very helpful to establish baselines, etc.
And how do boundaries help us and impact relationships in our day-to-day lives?
Well, boundaries serve as a multidisciplinary perimeter. They prevent burnout, build self-respect, strengthen relationships, and help us live authentically each day, where anything could happen. They can also create mutual respect and help prevent resentment and misunderstandings. They also align with healing to help us differentiate between healthy and toxic dynamics.
I have heard from many viewers and people in my life asking if boundaries are flexible.
The answer is absolutely yes, but they should be adjusted based on mutual respect, not guilt, shame, manipulation, and/or pressure.
I've also been asked, when it comes to boundary limitations, what are they?
This is difficult to answer definitively because it can be extremely uncomfortable and difficult to apply or discuss the challenges concerning boundary placement without having thoughts of, am I doing it right? Zrania, will they be mad at me? Logically, how do I know application methods, maintenance, etc.? The truth is, there may be guilt or fear of disappointing others, concerns over societal or cultural pressures and previous family dynamics, social conditioning, family systems, or childhood habituation for lack of application, making it hard in the later years. However, not applying them has even more detrimental consequences. It is important to acknowledge that boundary setting is a skill that takes practice and repetition.
A common and great question I get asked is, what does a boundary violation look like?
Well, for starters, it can be someone ignoring your no. Many women experience this, where the counterpart is unable to see the blatant no or signs leading to that, like withdrawal, non-communication, body language, etc. This relates to consent and implied consent, which we will cover in another podcast. A violation that many people ignore is being pressured into something you're uncomfortable with. We do like to try new things, but a big or small step past a boundary is a violation and should not be ignored. The response need not be so big or small. Only you will know what application is needed and to what extent. This applies to emotional manipulation or guilt tripping. Please be kind to yourself while identifying these violations, as they may have been survival strategies and societal projected norms. So recognizing and validating a violation needs kind, courteous self-love when exercising internally. It may take time as well to know where one sits with the violation, so an immediate response is not always necessary. Rome was not built in a day. Similarly, you may have feelings of frustration, resentment, exhaustion, loss of control, etc. when a boundary has been crossed or violated. This may be how you know there was a violation. Listen to yourself and meet yourself where you are at. Then move delicately from there. Reaffirm your limits. I've already said I'm not comfortable with this. Reduce your interaction if necessary. And if the boundary continues to be violated, reconsider the merits of the relationship.
How does one set and maintain boundaries? Oh, this is a good one, as I personally struggle with this in my life each day.
It is important to recognize your needs when looking at boundaries, like what makes you uncomfortable or drained regarding boundaries in your personal and professional settings. It helps when blame does not enter into boundary placement, so communicate clearly. The use of I statements, I need time for myself after work, etc., help when setting up and maintaining. The ability to enforce boundaries consistently is essential in maintenance. You can shift and move to reinforce the boundary, but stick to them, even when others push back, because that will keep your self-respect intact and viable, even if your mind is saying it doesn't. The biggest takeaway is to accept that not everyone will like or respect what you are trying to do while you are trying to place your boundaries, and that is okay. You will not likely see immediate results either, but keep going because you are worth it. Boundaries are about self-respect, not selfishness. Setting them isn't easy, but it's necessary for healthy relationships.
There are questions that I get asked frequently, like who benefits from no or limited boundaries, and who gains from weak or non-existent boundaries.
Well, for starters, the main group that springs to mind is manipulative people, narcissists, abusers, controlling partners, parents, family systems, and employers who exploit workers, to name a few.
Makes sense. How can someone recognize if their boundaries are too weak?
Well, they may feel obligated to say yes all the time to many things. They may feel like they are often exhausted or resentful. They feel guilty when prioritizing themselves over the request or demand.
So, what advice do you have for survivors of abuse or manipulation?
It helps if you can recognize that your needs always matter. Work on rebuilding self-trust while being kind to the self. Seek therapy or support groups if needed. Stand with people and validate their experiences. Remind them that they are loved.
How have you seen, in your practice, that cultural beliefs and traditions impact boundary setting?
Some cultures emphasize collectivism, making boundary setting a lot harder. Also, family expectations can make personal space feel impossible, and finding a balance between respect for tradition and personal autonomy is paramount.
I am going to outline 2 scenarios with my colleague to see what you would do to affirm a boundary is placed. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. Apply what your experience with boundaries says to you. First, made-up scenario. Unclear boundaries and how to fix them. Sarah and her best friend, Lisa, have been close since childhood. Lisa frequently drops by Sarah's house unannounced, expecting her to be available to talk or hang out. At first, Sarah didn't mind, but lately she's been overwhelmed with school, work, and personal responsibilities. She feels drained by Lisa's constant presence, but doesn't want to hurt her feelings by bringing up an issue with her, but not with Lisa. Sarah also notices that Lisa often shares Sarah's personal struggles with mutual friends, assuming it's okay since they are like family, and it is not a big deal. Sarah feels uncomfortable, but hasn't addressed it directly as she does not want conflict and a falling out in their relationship. Instead, she's been avoiding Lisa, hoping she'll get the hint. Now, Lisa is upset and keeps asking why Sarah is being distant and non-communicative. Sarah feels guilty, but also frustrated. What would you do in this scenario?
Well, the recommended but not always suitable response in setting and communicating boundaries may look like the following: having self-reflection over the relationship, reactions, situations, etc. Personal awareness may have Sarah needing to identify what makes her uncomfortable and why. Also reflecting that value is placed on her personal space and privacy, but has never communicated these needs to Lisa, so that Lisa knows it is an issue of importance to Sarah. In an attempt to exercise clear communication about Sarah's boundaries, she may choose a few options, like, instead of avoiding Lisa, Sarah decides to have a conversation, knowing that communication works both ways and Sarah is not responsible for Lisa's feelings or reactions. Starting with something like, "Lisa, I love our friendship, but I've been feeling overwhelmed and need some time to recharge. I'd really appreciate it if we could plan our visits in advance instead of drop-ins." And for the oversharing issue, I would say something like, "I also need to ask that anything I share with you stays between us unless I say otherwise. It's important for me to feel safe opening up to you." Another solid boundary surety is reinforcement and consistency for success, flexibility and modification of boundaries, and/or continued maintenance with behaviors and attitudes. If Lisa respects these requests, their friendship can continue to grow in a healthy way. If Lisa pushes back or ignores Sarah's needs, Sarah may need to create more distance or walk away entirely. Sarah can stay firm with statements like, "I understand if this is different from how we used to do things, but this is what I need right now."
I hear that the takeaway in this scenario about boundaries is 1. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away, they're about creating healthier relationships. 2. Avoidance and resentment build when we assume people will just know our needs. 3. Communicating boundaries clearly and kindly strengthens relationships based on mutual respect.
I'll continue the conversation with something fascinating about boundaries and the workplace. Did you know that studies show that 80% of workplace burnout stems from poor boundaries? Yet most of us never learned how to set them properly. Today we're diving into the psychology of boundaries and why they're the hidden foundation of every relationship we have.
That's such a striking statistic, and it really highlights how boundaries affect everything from our mental health to our career success. I've noticed more people talking about boundaries lately, but there's still so much confusion about what they actually are.
Let me break it down in a way that might surprise people. Boundaries are like your personal operating system. They're not just about saying no to things. They're the fundamental rules that determine how you interact with the world.
Couldn't agree more. Research shows that people who maintain clear digital boundaries, like not checking work emails after hours, report 35% better sleep quality and significantly lower anxiety levels. I will outline the second scenario, which is a workplace issue that many people experience in their day-to-day work life. The scenario is called workplace manipulation and setting boundaries in the workplace, and is outlined as follows. Alex is a new employee at a marketing firm and wants to impress their boss, Jordan. Early on, Jordan starts asking Alex to stay late to, be part of the team and help the team, as we are like family here, and take on extra tasks outside of their job description. At first, Alex is eager to prove their dedication, but soon they notice a pattern building that disrupts their boundaries.
First is addressing the unpaid overtime, being frequently asked to stay late, implying that going home on time means they aren't a team player or part of the family. The second task is directly acknowledging Alex's role, which keeps getting added over and over again, but there's no mention of a raise or promotion. The third issue in this scenario that may be hidden and unexpressed is guilt and fear. Jordan plays on Alex's emotions and eagerness to be part of the team, but ignores Alex whenever Alex hints at feeling overwhelmed, and Jordan responds with things like, "I thought you were ambitious. Do you want this career or not?" And lastly, the imbalance and unequal treatment Alex is receiving because they do not know the dynamic in play. Alex notices that others in similar roles don't have the same pressure or responsibility outside their role. This situation could create a scenario where Alex feels stuck because they don't want to be seen as lazy or uncommitted, but they're exhausted and frustrated.
What would you do or say if you were Alex?
The recommended but not always suitable response in asserting professional boundaries without burning bridges may look like the following. Try to recognize the manipulation and the power dynamics between Jordan and the boss. In this situation, Alex clearly acknowledges that Jordan is using guilt and/or fear to get more work without fair compensation. Using terms like being a team player shouldn't mean sacrificing one's own personal well-being. The second phase is communicating clearly and professionally when addressing the crossed boundary that Alex is experiencing. This can be done by Alex scheduling time for a private meeting with Jordan and saying something like, "I really appreciate the opportunities I've had here, and I'm committed to doing my best work. I have noticed that I've been taking on responsibilities beyond my role and working additional hours without an adjustment in pay or title. I'd love to discuss how we can align my workload with my job description or explore compensation for these extra duties." It is possible to offer solutions to the situation, not just complaints. So instead of just pushing back, Alex can suggest a method of prioritization with, "Can we clarify which tasks are the most critical for my role?" Subsequently, in the meeting, create a fair, proactive compensation conversation, using words like, "If I continue handling these extra responsibilities, could we discuss a potential salary adjustment or title change?" while collectively redefining Alex's work hours and maintaining workplace boundaries with, "I'm happy to stay late when necessary, but I need to maintain a balance to ensure quality work."
Thank you for those thoughtful responses from my colleague. I'll recap. Hopefully, this will help to enforce boundaries firmly for Alex and Jordan alike, but ensure that if the boundary is not met, then the following will be applied. 1. If Jordan continues to pressure Alex, they stay firm. "I'm happy to contribute during my scheduled hours, but I can't continue unpaid overtime consistently." 2. If manipulation continues, Alex keeps documentation of conversations and considers HR or job hunting if the culture is toxic. Yeah, so many of us have been there. So here's Alex, new at this marketing firm, and their boss Jordan starts with these seemingly innocent requests to stay late and take on extra work. But here's the kicker. Studies show that employees who regularly work overtime are 61% more likely to develop serious health issues within 5 years.
And you know what makes it even more complicated? The way Jordan uses this "we're a family here" rhetoric. Psychology research shows that companies using family metaphors are 23% more likely to have employees report feeling manipulated into overworking. So perhaps we could consider a 3-step approach that workplace psychologists recommend. First, document everything, every extra task, every late night. Second, schedule a formal meeting using what's called the sandwich method. Start positively, address concerns, and end constructively. Third, and this is crucial, set clear metrics for success.
That also reminds me of something really important about personal boundaries, like in the case of Sarah and Lisa, which we discussed earlier. In this situation, it perfectly illustrates how boundary violations in friendships can be just as damaging as workplace issues. Recent studies show that friendships with unclear boundaries are 40% more likely to end in conflict.
Well, that certainly puts things into perspective. And what's more about Sarah's situation? They are dealing with what psychologists call inherited boundary patterns. Research shows we often recreate the boundary patterns we grew up with, even when they don't serve us well. That's such an important point about how our past experiences shape our boundary-setting abilities.
Studies show it takes an average of 66 days to establish new boundary habits. So, when Sarah starts setting boundaries with Lisa about unannounced visits and privacy, she needs to understand it's a process, not a one-time conversation.
You know, that brings up an interesting question about cultural differences in boundary setting. As across 42 countries, it shows that collectivist cultures often view individual boundaries very differently than individualistic societies. For instance, in many Asian cultures, the concept of personal space is about 40% smaller than in Western countries.
Right. Studies also show that people who successfully navigate cross-cultural boundaries typically use what's called the explain and adapt method. They clearly explain their needs while showing respect for different cultural norms.
And speaking of different contexts, let's talk about digital boundaries, because the data here is pretty shocking. The average person now checks their phone 262 times per day. That's once every 5.5 minutes. And psychologists have found that setting digital boundaries, like having tech-free zones or times, can increase productivity by up to 40% and reduce stress levels by 27%. But here's the catch. It only works if you're consistent.
This may be helpful, as recent studies show that people with clear, consistent boundaries are 58% less likely to experience burnout and report 45% higher levels of life satisfaction. But here's what's really fascinating. It's not just about having boundaries, it's about how we communicate them. Research also shows that people who maintain healthy boundaries have cortisol levels that are 23% lower than those who don't. So, when we talk about boundaries, we're really talking about physical and mental health. Thank you so much for joining us in the Grief and Boundary conversation. Again, to reiterate, boundaries are about self-respect, not selfishness. They help us build healthier relationships and protect our mental health.
Right. We have talked about boundaries, what they are, how to set them, and what to do when someone tramples all over them like a toddler on a sandcastle. But what if you need backup? No worries, we have you covered. Here's a practical toolkit. Resources, support, etc. for boundary setting success. Let's cover them together.
1. The No Toolkit. Because no is a complete sentence. App must have Nope button, a literal button that says Nope in different voices when pressed. Okay, it's mostly a joke, but imagine using it in meetings. Book must have. The Book of Boundaries by Melissa Urban teaches you how to say no without sounding like a jerk. Phrase to practice. That doesn't work for me. A classy way to say no without over-explaining.
2. Digital bodyguards, apps to enforce your boundaries. Do not disturb mode, because not every text needs an immediate response. Google Calendar's fake meeting trick. Block off time for yourself so your boss or friends don't steal it. Unsend email feature. When you agree to something you regret exactly 2.5 seconds later.
3. The boundary buddy system. Find a boundary bestie, someone you text before caving into guilt and shame. Am I crazy for saying no to working on my day off? Use a safe word, like rhino, or whatever makes you laugh, to remind each other to hold the line. It is difficult work you are doing. Why not make it a little playful?
4. Books and podcasts. Because knowledge is power, and also an excuse to ignore people. Additional podcast. Outside this one. Terrible, thanks for asking podcast. Helps you feel less alone when setting boundaries feels awful. Book. Set Boundaries. Find Peace by Nedra Glover. Tawab. The Ultimate Guide to Saying No, Guilt-Free. Audiobook. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F by Mark Manson. A blunt but effective pep talk.
5. Applying sound exit strategies. Ghosting, but we're making it healthy. Leave early. Script. This has been great, but I have an early morning. Let's catch up soon. Redirect the talker. Trick. If someone won't stop venting, try, "Wow, that's tough. What are you thinking of doing about it?" Most people don't actually want solutions. They just want to talk. Use the reply timer rule. If it's urgent, they'll call. If not, they can wait.
And finally, number 6. Emergency backup. The go-to therapy, but while having fun. Therapist directories. Check out BetterHelp, Psychology Today, or a local therapist who specializes in boundaries and grief. Therapy meme pages to follow at Sit with Wit or at The Holistic Psychologist for boundary setting inspiration.
And lastly, a good old journaling prompt. What's one thing I said yes to that I wish I had said no to? And document it, the situation, the feelings, the reaction, the what if, woulda, coulda, shoulda done scenarios, etc. And I also put this to you outside the journal prompt as the listener. Ask yourself from this episode, what's one boundary you feel you need to set today to stabilize your mental health and/or relationships? Let's dig in and learn from it. There's no time like the present.
Our collective closing thoughts, sage advice, and rules to live by.
Boundaries aren't walls, they're fences with gates you control. So build a good one, decorate it how you want, and let in only the people who respect the no trespassing sign. Thank you for joining us today, and to both my contributors for aiding in life discoveries, both in personal and professional capacities. I acknowledge that grief, loss, boundaries, and trauma are not easy things to carry, but you don't have to carry them alone. Wherever you are in your journey, I hope you give yourself the grace to feel, to heal, and to simply be heard. If today's episode brought up difficult emotions, take the time you need. Breathe, rest. Reach out to the professionals, friends, family, etc. if you need support. There is no right way to grieve, only the way that is yours. You can also reach out on social media at @GriefAnatomy or leave a comment wherever you're listening. Let's keep this dialogue going. It's how we grow and learn as a community. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on Grief Anatomy's social media: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. Listen on YouTube at Grief Anatomy so you never miss an episode. If you found value here today, consider sharing this podcast with somebody who might need it. Remember to be ridiculously kind and gentle with yourself. Every step forward, no matter how small, is progress.